It's not going to come. 80% of the world is inspired by something. Only 20% of people take actions. So if all we needed to do was listen to a TED Talk, we'd all be millionaires, right?
The question for today's episode will be, does awareness equate to progress? Also, the guest for today's episode is founder of Hicks News Media, tech strategist and host of Team No Sleep, James Hicks, and founder of Make the Shift, personal and career coach, Lauren Morrison.
So thank you both for joining us today, Lauren and James. We're excited to have you a part of the Infusion Network as we tackle this question today. This question came to me when I was trying to think of basically what it takes for a person to change a behavior on their own. And I say on their own because I'm a registered behavior technician, which means I work with kids with autism and other special needs to help reduce their behaviors, whatever that behavior may be, whether it's kicking, spitting, pica, or self-injury. And as a person that works to manipulate said behaviors in others, I simply started thinking, what would it take for a person to change their own behavior without any external elements? And once I settled on awareness being an important factor, I then asked the question if awareness equated to progress. And here we are. So the question is, does awareness equate to progress? You can start off whenever you're ready, Lauren.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny because when I first read this question, my first instinct was awareness does not equate to progress. But then I stopped myself and I said to myself, I was like, what is the definition that I'm giving to progress? And I think the definition I was giving to progress was like enough, is awareness enough? And the answer to that is awareness isn't enough. Like it's not necessarily the game changer, because after awareness, there is a decision that needs to be made and steps that need to be taken. So when I took that step back, I was like, okay, wait a minute, let me think about this, because, when we talk about addictions or like the 12 steps, what do they always say? Step number 1 is admitting that you have a problem. So the mere fact that it is a step, awareness is a step, and it's not something that just comes naturally to anyone. You do have to do work in order to gain awareness. So I do look at awareness as a step, which to me equates to progress, not the end state, not enough, but progress.
Now, how does that apply to what you do in your day-to-day? Because as a business coach, as a business mentor, you work with organizations that have various problems. And so how do you navigate and help guide them through the process of identifying a problem and then resolving it? How is that similar or dissimilar?
Yeah, it's a great question, actually. So I do, so let's take, when I talk about one-on-one coaching or when I do workshops within organizations, even in workshops within organizations, module number 1 is always like self-awareness based. It's always, how is it, whether it's leadership, whether it's diversity, equity, and inclusion, it always starts with self, right? Understanding how we show up as a default is really important in terms of creating change in your own personal journey, because understanding what your brain's default pattern is and being able to pinpoint and make a decision about whether or not this is something that you want to focus on changing is really important, because 80 to 90% of the time our brain is on autopilot. So if we don't take the time to act or take the space to understand how we show up as a default, understand what our triggers are, understand what our brain's natural inclinations are, then we can't make a decision of whether to change it. And I think that even in talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion training that we do with organizations, we spend a lot of time on unconscious bias, because the most dangerous thing that people the most dangerous thing when it comes to unconscious bias is to say that you don't have biases. Because if you believe that there is nothing to be aware of, then there's no action. So awareness is step number 1 in terms of acknowledgement and taking action.
Just out of curiosity, has anyone here taken I think it's one of those schools, either Harvard or Yale, they have a website where it's an unconscious bias test?
Yes.
You've taken it? Which one is it?
Yeah, I've taken that one before.
Were you surprised by the results?
Absolutely surprised by it's and I think that is what's so difficult about unconscious bias training or personal or self-awareness. The reason why it's so difficult is because there is a version of ourselves that consciously we would like to believe that we are. We would love to believe that everyone is equal. We would love to believe that we treat everyone the same. But so when there is that conscious thing that we all believe that we value, but when you really get under the covers and when you really start to dig into your unconscious biases in your script, you find that you actually have tendencies that don't suggest that you treat everyone the same or you look at everyone the same. I know for myself, and I'll be open and transparent, one of the things that came up for me in that unconscious bias training was a bias towards people with disabilities. And a lot of and that's a great thing for me to be aware of and to understand, because would I ever want to say that out loud? Would I ever, put that out there in the forefront to say something I believe? No, but now that I'm aware of it, there are two things that I can do. And that is to find ways to, part of the reason why I have that bias is because I don't make the effort to incorporate, I don't make enough effort to incorporate people with disabilities into my life, into my circle. So I don't have a lot of stories and scripts to counter some of the things that the media shows, right? I don't have a lot of real life experience to tie to be able to create new scripts. And when I don't build those experiences into my life, now I'm just subject to whatever the media says or whatever a friend says, or, so I don't have enough information to really counter those biases. But that in turn allows me to, again, make a decision about checking myself when I'm in the presence of people with disabilities, number one, and number two, finding ways to learn more about them, ask more questions, and get more information to combat that unconscious bias.
James, what about you?
Yeah, very similar to what Lauren said, right? I mean, I really think it's not the end goal, but it's positive progression, right? Awareness symbolizes that you're actually making that positive progression, and there's still work to be done, right? And it means that you're on a forward track, on a forward momentum type of thing. But again, knowing that you haven't reached that end goal of whatever the case it is that you're trying to get to, but the fact that you are aware that there's an issue, there's a situation, there's a problem, there's an opportunity, whatever the case may be. Now you know where to go. Now you know how to progress through and start moving towards a solution or towards a remedy or something of that nature. But don't get complacent and think that now that I know what I know, I'm done. Now you know, and you're conscious of the fact that I know how to either pivot, or I need to change, or I need to incorporate some new thought patterns, things of that nature. So I'd say it's a positive momentum into the direction of actually getting to that end goal and remedy. So
yeah. And I would think even on top of that, like to what you were saying, is that you also can make the decision to stop there. Right? True.
Yeah. Right.
And that is a decision. Like I would love to say that, awareness in all arenas is going to equate to forward progression. But that's not necessarily the case. I don't know that we have the capacity to, resolve all of the things that we're, in terms of resolving all of our biases, resolving all the things that we're aware of, but it's being really in tune to what is important to you, what is a change that you want to see in the world, and then identifying which of those key pieces of awareness you need to hone in on, because changing that, actually forward progression from that awareness, you have to go against your brain's natural patterns, which means doing something unnatural a lot. And that's a lot of energy to put into multiple things simultaneously, right?
Yeah.
And not everyone can do that.
Yeah.
Right. So, Brian, listen, you've been on my show. I can talk, brother. So I'm gonna keep talking. Just shut me off whenever you need. I'm also one of the persons that feel I can't motivate you. Right. You have to be self-motivated. I can't do the rah-rah. I can't do the Tony Rock. Right. I can't make you get to the point to where you're motivated to change. You're now aware of a situation. Again, like Lauren was saying, you can stop there, but you have to have it somehow innate within you at some core foundational level to say, I now want to be different, do different, act different, whatever the case may be. Yeah. I find it really, there's some unicorns out there, but I think it's highly unlikely that a third party can directly motivate you into changing something that you may not want to. You have to have that innate desire within yourself to either want to be different, act different, or whatever the case may be. So, I mean,
hey, James,
not everyone's going to make that next step.
Nope.
Do you think it's James? Do you think it's possible to subtly manipulate somebody into actually changing? So for instance, your friend of yours say, "Hey, James, I want to work out," but they're aware that they have to work out and they want to work out, but they don't actually work out. So what if you like send them workout videos of you working out? Yeah, this is like that. Like, so you ever like try to manipulate them into?
That's not going to work either, right? So again, I can put different scenarios in front of a person and say, this is what happens when you don't, to use your analogy, that you don't go to the gym. If I, I'm gonna be under the squat rack in about 2 hours. After we get done with this, that's where I'm gonna be. But I can't force you to do that. I can tell you the pros and cons and give you kind of the, high cholesterol, bad heart disease, all of the things that would happen if you don't decide to take care of yourself. But you have to make that choice yourself. You got to put on the gear. You got to go down the street to the gym. You have to make that decision yourself. I can present you with the pros and cons. You have to weigh that and say, I would much rather either do this or I would much rather do that. Now I can help influence into your decision, but I can't motivate you to get up off the couch and come with me and get into the gym.
Right.
If I recall correctly, there were studies done in trying to get people to curb smoking habits. And letting people who are active smokers see pictures of lung damage did not deter them. And I learned the hard way as a child. I remember in elementary school, they had the seminar was this, don't do drugs that taste like bugs, and they play the corny music and tell you don't smoke and do all that stuff. And so I went home and I went to my granddad's house and I was telling him about how bad it was to smoke cigarettes. He smoked and he never stopped smoking because of that. The only thing that did stop him from smoking temporarily was he had a life-threatening scare, and then he stopped for a period of months, and then he picked it back up, but he reduced his usage as a consequence of that. But just seeing the outcome, like showing a smoker a picture of a black lung, that would equate to them being aware. They know what it does to their body, but that's not going to change the behavior for most people.
The thing is that, and especially I find this in my line of work, is that everybody knows what to do. Everyone knows how to lose weight. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's not the problem. The knowledge isn't the problem. It's they don't understand why they're not doing it. And the reason why they're not doing it, actually, there was another study that was done too, that was talking about on the life or death situation where they had, 7 people who were told that they were going to die if they didn't change their habits, if they didn't drastically change their eating, their exercise routine, etc. Only one of those 7 actually changed their habits. Even in life or death, as a consequence, even that is not enough to force us to change our habits or to change who we are, because there's something inside of us called a hidden competing commitment. And a hidden competing commitment is something that we are subconsciously committed to that overrides this external commitment that we wish we could be committed to. I wish that I could be committed to going to the gym more, 6 days a week. But I'm committed to something different that is more aligned with what my actions are. I'm committed to something that is more in line with my actions to eat unhealthy, more in line with my actions to, watch Netflix instead of working out. And that is what the hidden competing commitment is. And then sometimes that's where it the digging that I do with clients, because a lot of clients will come to me and they'll be like, I just need a better time management system. And 10 minutes into the conversation, they're crying. Not because I told them about some crazy agenda situation that they have, but it's doing that digging to find out that to get to the reason, get down to the core about they don't have a agenda problem. They don't have a time management problem. They have a problem with boundaries. They have a problem with, hypervigilance. They have a problem with self-worth. And when you have to confront that hidden competing commitment of maybe fulfilling a prophecy, of fulfilling a narrative that you've just never known anything else other than life, like I'm not worthy, doing anything counter to that is not in line with that commitment. So you really have to identify what that, I know, like for me, I used to have this hidden competing commitment in my own business that I I'm not the one who outshines people. I'm the one who supports people. And if I outshine anybody in my family, then that's taking away something from my identity. So how far do you really think that I'm going to get in terms of doing things to be in the spotlight? I will always find ways to bring myself back until I identify what that hidden competing commitment is, so that again, when I see it coming up, when I can see myself pulling myself back, I can have that awareness and say, I'm going to do something different.
Is it because it's easier to stay where we are? Is it status quo, right? It's easier to not do anything different, right? It takes effort. It takes work to change habits, to change lifestyles, to change thought patterns and things of that nature. And as a human species, we want it to be easier. But
it's not just about easier, but it's about predictability, because if our brain wants one thing, our brain wants certainty. Our brain our brain is designed for survival. It's not designed to thrive, right? It's not for that. So anytime we introduce change, a change of pattern or anything like that, our brain gets uncomfortable with that, because if it can no longer detect what the outcome of your actions are going to be, it gets scared. And it starts to send you messages of like, stay on the couch. Don't worry about what Joshua's sending you. He'll keep sending you that tomorrow. It doesn't mean you got to work out today, right? Like that is how our brain is. And that happens in a fifth of a second, that our brain will trigger a response that says, you don't need to change anything. And here's a million reasons why. And you really have to do unnatural things to overcome that voice and do something different. But to your point, James, like, it's not going to come. 80% of the world is inspired by something. Only 20% of people take actions. So if all we needed to do was listen to a TED Talk, we'd all be millionaires, right?
Tomorrow, right? Yeah.
I really like the point that you touched on about identity. Identity is paramount in determining our life trajectory, so the narratives that we tell ourselves. So if anyone here is familiar with Atomic Habits, they talk about how the stories that we tell ourselves, we have an internal mechanism, and I think this might be what you were talking about with the hidden competing commitment. I've never heard that term before, but it sounds very similar to this. But we strive for congruence between our identity and our actions, and so when there's some kind of disagreement there, that's where cognitive dissonance sets in. So you either have to change the behavior and admit something was wrong, or you have a discomfort there. And so most people, when you tell them something that conflicts with their identity, they get uncomfortable. And people don't like that.
Yeah. That's why a lot of mothers have, a hard time. Take time for yourself. Put yourself first. That's not their identity, it goes against the identity of being, all the things that, mothers and women have bred to be over years and years and years. Like, there is an identity that you take on when it comes to, I'm being general right now, just to be clear, but there's an identity that you take on when you become a mother, and selflessness is like at the top of the chart. So when you do anything that is just for you, they brand themselves as, that goes against my identity. But it doesn't mean that they're good with it. It doesn't mean that resentment doesn't fester in a lot of ways. But again, it's that saying something. So sometimes it's that moment where you say something that is kind of swirling around in there, but you don't. It's like vomiting. That's really what it's like. It really is like vomiting. It's about bringing up the stuff that is just under your belly, saying it out loud, being like, I hate that. I hate the fact that I think that doing anything for me is a knock against my identity as a woman. But I have to say that out loud to look at it and be like, I don't even like Chinese food. Why is that in there? Like, it's what's necessary.
Make it plain. There you go. Make it plain. That's what my pastor always used to say, make it plain.
And now take a brief pause from today's episode for our Business of the Week segment. This week's Business of the Week is Ginger Ale by Carl Hale Jr. Ginger Ale specializes in ginger lemonade produced locally that allows you to capitalize on the health benefits of ginger, such as immune boosting, digestion aid, as well as easing menstrual pain. Their ginger lemonade comes in 5 flavors, of which matcha blueberry is my personal favorite. Check out their website to place your order today. Now back to the episode. My brothers in arms, I am curious to see what you all have to say about this.
For me, I actually agree with everything you guys said, really. I think when it comes to the question, it does, but not meaningful progress. It's only 1/3 of the steps toward progress. And the first step is awareness. You have to first be aware that progress is needed and things need to change. And then you have to want to change things. And I say that because you can acknowledge that progress is needed and things need to change, but you don't want to change things. And then after you want to change things, the next step is actually doing it. And Brian said yesterday that he knows a lot of people that are aware of the problem, want to change, but still don't do it. And this is true with people, which is why actually implementing change is the last step. And I would say this, I believe that if a person wants to change things, but aren't actually implementing change, there's something that person isn't fully aware of that's resulting in that block. For an example, I mentioned the gym. Earlier in the year, I was aware that I needed to go to the gym to live a healthier lifestyle. And I also wanted to go to the gym to build a healthier lifestyle, but I wasn't going to the gym. So I had to go back to my awareness and find out what was blocking me from actually going to the gym. And come to find out, it was a variety of things. Part of it was finding the right time with a limited crowd. Part of it was I needed to change my routine. Part of it was I needed to switch out my workouts. So once I became fully aware of what was blocking me, I was able to actually implement that change of actually going to the gym. But I will also say this, I put awareness in front of wanting it for a reason. And from going back to the first step of awareness, I was able to come to the conclusion that I didn't actually want it. Or better yet, I wanted it, but for the wrong reasons. I tricked myself to convince myself it was for a healthier lifestyle. But in reality, it was just to show off for summertime or whatever. And me personally, if I'm doing something for what I deem is the wrong reason, then that passion won't last. So once I realized I was doing it for the wrong reasons, I was in a better position to remove that block and then go to the gym with a different mindset. So that's really why I say it's really a 3-step process. Awareness, you got to actually want to do it, and then do it.
Man, put that on a t-shirt, brother. That's y'all next t-shirt.
Just want to do it and then do it. What was the 3rd step?
Man. Then do it. Yeah. Do it.
There were 3 steps. It was like the awareness,
you have to want it, and then
go do it.
Yeah, do it. Implement it.
I think that 3rd portion is going to get us a cease and desist from Nike.
I was about to say, I heard it somewhere.
We know somebody. We can figure it out.
Just go ahead and do it.
Yeah, we'll figure something out.
Get it done.
It's good too. Yeah.
Yes, I see you pondering.
You've been pondering all discussion.
Yeah, because I was very subjective in my thought when I was thinking about how I originally wanted to answer the question. And then as I heard the direction you were going in the introduction, and then I heard James and Lauren's beautiful dialogue and responses behind their reasonings why awareness may not necessarily equate to progress, I hope you was going to pull the God's advocate card. I was really hoping you were going to pull God's advocate card, because man, we're really on the topic of disabilities, just the genesis of this conversation. And then Lauren, and thank you for the honesty and openness, because that is a very big thing. But my son is also on the autism spectrum, and so as I was really listening, my response was coming from a place of me, like me as a day trader, me as a man, me as a young parent. I had my son at 22, just all these things, and I was really on my high horse, very subjective. And I have this philosophy that knowledge isn't power, but it's potential power. And that's typically how I go about things. But that's just from my perspective of being a programmed human being, who's gone through general education and then of course higher education as well. Funny enough, with all 3 of us graduated from Old Dominion, I started to backtrack. And as I started to backtrack, I looked at it from a perspective of it depends on where that person is at. And reason why I was hoping that Josh was going to play God's advocate is because he has the wealth of knowledge in this, is because when we're talking about children on the spectrum, the very first part of, how can I say, what is your plan? Like your intervention plan is bringing awareness to that there is something going on. Because, for example, with my son, like I've repeated myself over and over again. There's things that I've been repeating for like 3 years. And in my head, when I know he now has awareness to that thing, that is undoubtedly progress. That is 3 years of suffering. Think about it from a numerical perspective. You're in the negative. If you're already in the negative, 0 is progress and 0 is awareness. So to get from that negative to that 0, that is undoubtedly progress. And then of course the plan, once you've got back to 0, is going to be, the additional steps that Josh mentioned. Now that you know what you need to do, you have to implement the plan and then you do it. I've also was thinking just from a perspective of children in general. Children in general are very, very intuitive. So there's not any real patterns that they're breaking. There's patterns that they're developing. And so if you put a iPad or if you put building blocks or anything in front of them, they're getting this object for the very first time, and they're just at 0 building. Like they're now aware of this thing and all the things that they can do with it. And then their mind is just looking at numerous ways to build something off of it. And then who knows where it goes from there. But then I think about it from the human perspective, and we're all programmed. So if we have negative programming that comes from our parents, the word of the 21st century has been breaking generational curses. Mm-hmm. So in a way, because we are already at a disadvantage, I think we at some point need to really be kinder with ourselves and say awareness is actually progress. Because you guys brought the example of the smoker. If there is 3 generations worth of smokers in my bloodline and you post a picture of, your lungs, it doesn't mean shit to me. Let's be honest. I mean, I've gone through 3 generations of smokers. Some of my people have lived to like 90 years old. They've outlasted people that, are on rabbit diets. And like, so I think at some point we do have to be a little bit more, objective and say like awareness is actually it's the genesis of progress.
Absolutely.
And I think if we look at it from a perspective of meditation, like when you're meditating and there's just something bothering you that you just cannot figure out what is going on, coworker, someone flicked you off when you were driving, you're meditating to bring awareness to what is actually bothering you. And then once you are able to pinpoint what is exactly bothering you, then you get to be, you get to stepping into your true God power, and you're able to implement the plans to get yourself out of that negative. But some people don't have that ability. So I do think that it is important for us to say like, we're all human beings at the end of the day. Not everyone is blessed with 2 parents that pour into them. And then not everyone is blessed with the gift of intuition, because some people do abuse their intuition and they get disconnected from that. There is definitely a realm of spirituality with it, to where the second you abuse that intuition, you disconnect from it, and it's very, 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 very hard to reconnect to it. Mm-hmm. And so I think it is important as like we shift into this next part of the dialogue to say, okay, well, how actually can, for the viewer that really is struggling to get over that pebble, not that boulder, not that mountain, that pebble, to get onto the other side to where they now have awareness, and then they can implement, the next steps for change. Because I do agree, very, very subjective. Like when I look at Desmond Tillman in the mirror, awareness is not good enough for me, but that's just my programming. Like my parents are like 1%ers in their fact. Like my mom is a captain in the Navy. She's 1% of women as a black female, or as a black woman, as a black woman in the Navy. She's achieved things that every book has, essentially been stacked against for her. And then my dad, on the same hand, is lieutenant commander. Like my parents really didn't come from, wealthy backings. Like they went out and they did it. So of course, naturally that has been pushed down into me, but there's things that I have to weave out to where I do need to be soft at times. And I think we need to, speak to the softer side of ourselves, to where we can actually like pat ourselves on the back, because it is very, very condescending at times, like to look at what we equate as progress, because then that taints what true progress is and true awareness is when we're talking to our children. Because I know, you touched perfectly on it, Lauren, like mother's instinct, but sometimes they're single fathers, like they have to take on that mother's instinct, and it is the hardest. I'll tell you firsthand perspective, like it is the hardest thing to do, because you're so used to perfection. Okay, you fucked up, fix it. Whereas sometimes you have to look at your child and you say, okay, you fucked up, how do I help you fix it? And right. I think that is the point that I'm trying to make. Long-winded.
Man, that's good. You mind if I interject real quick? Because it brings up something I want. The fact of celebrating that awareness and the fact of celebrating that progression, do you feel that should be done as well to help with, the individual who has gone from, I love that analogy that you have, from negative to zero, right? And then from zero to whatever, celebrating that awareness factor that you were at negative 10 and now you're at zero, but you've got that awareness, but either the folks around you and or yourself realizing that you've made that movement forward and celebrating that. What do you guys think about that?
I'm glad you said that. I do have a perfect segues for it. So in ABA, which is applied behavioral analysis, there is positive reinforcement. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to, whether it's with your children or with your friends or your partner, to have positive reinforcement, like just words of affirmation or checking in with them, celebrating their wins every single day. And that's not to be confused with instant gratification. And I say instant gratification because someone can get from negative 10 to 0 and then go all out and be like, yeah, I'm about to go to the club, I'm about to celebrate, but you haven't really accomplished anything yet substantial. You've brought yourself out of the hole, and now you're trying to ball, you're trying to go to the Rolex store with a WIC card. It's not going to work out.
Come on now.
So I think that is the important line to draw, that, okay, if we're going to sit here and flip the switch and say awareness needs to be celebrated, then we need to break down what is the celebration. And I think it is very, very important to not tiptoe into instant gratification first, because instant gratification is the poison that is going to lead to everyone's demise. I do think that, go ahead, Lauren.
No, please finish. Yeah.
I said, I do think it's going to be the poison that leads to everyone's demise, because once you get that taste, you're going to want it. And there's going to be times where the means aren't affording an end, and you're still going to want that. And then you're going to end up right back where you were, where you're back at zero, and then you're just regressing. So there is a very, very firm line between instant gratification and positive reinforcement.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a great conversation, and it's a great line, and that's the thing with fine lines. Like, you just never know when you're like on it, off it. Yeah. But just interesting conversation that's been coming up in general around that I've been even having outside of this podcast here around celebrating wins, especially like high achievers do not like to celebrate wins, because celebration in their mind equals complacency, right? If I'm celebrating, then that means I'm done, and I'm not done. I still have so far to go. But to that point is that when we are constantly assessing ourselves around, when we're constantly assessing ourselves around how far we have to go, the thing is that yardstick continuously moves. So we're constantly assessing ourselves against a gap, versus taking that moment to be able to acknowledge what the progress is, and acknowledge that, me acknowledging the progress doesn't mean that I'm going to be complacent. Doesn't mean, and this actually even came up when I was talking to leaders about giving positive feedback, afraid to give people too much positive feedback because they just might start slacking off, right? Or thinking, like, to your point, like, I'm done, I could just go ball out now. And so Desmond, I think you're right, where there is definitely a fine line, and giving people positive reinforcement, but in a way that is still developmental, instead of saying like, hey man, you're good, like forever. No further work required. Like,
It is definitely a tough line to walk, because I will say I've never, well, I've told my family like the story, but in trading, you don't really follow, and I don't want to sound like a revolutionary, but you don't follow like society's laws. Like, you create your own that is going to increase your discipline. It's going to dictate how you live your life, how you treat other people, because when you're trading, you are responsible for clicking the buy or the sell button. Nobody else. Nobody can influence you to click that button but yourself. And so a little bit of the story is like I made 14 grand in like a 2-week span. And I just remember talking to my mentor, and I was like, I've been trading on this MacBook Air that I've had since like 2015. Half of the screen is cracked, and he's like, I don't want to take that money out of the market just yet, because I'm afraid of what it's going to do to me. Because, to be honest, I took out 10 and I paid myself, but the thing that I was so scared of was that I had made so much money in such a short amount of time that instant gratification was going to poison all the discipline that I had built up, over the past 3 years of working at this craft. And I was like, sure enough, as soon as I took the 10 out, because everything that I had done up to this point was percentage based. And then I was like, all right, well, I'm at this point, I'm just going to take 10 out. And then so I bought a new MacBook, paid off some debt. And then sure enough, as soon as I went back to the trading, then I lost 5. And then I lost another 3. And then I lost another 3. And then so it's really one of those things to where, like, you have to have awareness, but then you also have to have a true solid foundation that you've built for yourself that serves as your checks and balances.
Yeah, like a system.
Yes. And I was like, and the second that you violate one of those rules, with you violating it, you run the risk of the whole operation tumbling. Yeah. And so it's a lesson that I've like really meditated on over the past like 2 weeks a lot, is because I've tasted success, and then I bit the apple a little too soon and a little too much, and now it's like, all right, I've just been building myself back up to those points, because I'm not gonna lie, $10,000 isn't life-changing money, but $10,000 in a repeated 2-week time span, it's 52 weeks in the year, 26. If we do 26 times 10, you're looking at over $250,000 in a year. And that's just by you creating your own rules and living life how you want to live it. So that's where I come from, the perspective of like, no, awareness actually does equal progress in some form, depending on how you're looking at it and depending on how you live your life.
My response to the question is actually colored by a conversation Josh and I had yesterday. And it's been, Des, I see you're already laughing, because you're probably aware of where this is probably going to go. But we touched on this in the past, and my answer hasn't really changed. Maybe it's gotten more specific, and I want to detail and drill down further. So I say no unless it's something that is not widely known already by the affected individuals. And even so, the attempts must be made towards a solution afterwards. Otherwise, stagnant awareness, that is truly counterproductive. And the reason I say that is because if you're aware of something, you know how severe it is. And if you know how severe it is, you act accordingly. If you're not acting accordingly, you don't know how severe it is. So it's like you're not really aware. That's my main problem with it. And then so when it comes to awareness being a solution, my problem with that is that it's not solution oriented. It's not. And so when people say that awareness is the answer to anything, there's several different questions that present themselves. Okay, first, what group of people need to be aware? How do we make them aware? How many people in that group need to be aware? And then how aware do they need to be? So that's something, Josh, I think you may have alluded to when you were first responding to this question yourself, is that if something fails, it means that the people weren't aware enough. And so how many times can we say that? And I was expecting this conversation to be on a more sociological level, but I'm actually glad, Josh, you surprised me, pleasantly surprised, that we're focusing on the individual psychology of change. And so I think that that criteria that I just listed, it still applies to the individual, but it doesn't negate my previous stance. And so just to give you some more insight, Des, Lauren, James, on what we're talking about. So yesterday, Josh and I were shooting a movie review for one of the other series that we have on under the banner of the Infusion Network. And so we were talking about the progression or the lack of progress that Black people currently have. And so this has been a ongoing conversation that Josh and I have been having since the dawn of time, it feels like. But this is that's what kind of colored my perspective here. And for that reason, I would still say that is awareness isn't enough. It's not, there's nothing you can take action on there. It's not clearly defined. And my conversation with Josh yesterday, Josh, I really do appreciate something you brought up. You brought up the role of patience when it comes to awareness and changing groups of individuals. And that's something I honestly lack. And I'm looking for not instant gratification, but I am a firm believer in taking action fast. And so one of the things that we touched on earlier, I believe it was either Lauren or Des, but the problem isn't information. The problem is execution. That's something that Ian says all the time. Ian, the master investor, he says, we don't need more information. We just need to execute. And I think that is the case for a vast majority of people, our people included. And when it comes specifically to Black people, our destruction has been systematic. So thus must be our rebuilding. We must be the conscious architects of transcending that. If someone designed a system that's going to be our downfall, we need to be more adamant about designing systems that will prevent that, and then also get us back to where we need to be and to new heights.
That's something to say, Des?
Yeah, my biggest problem, well, it's not even a problem, I guess, just to be the rebuttal to that point is I mean, it comes back to like awareness, like true awareness. And I don't, as much as we like to point fingers and imply that you should be aware, awareness at the end of the day, it's conscious knowledge. And if you are not conscious and fully aware of, and you and I are, I think everyone here knows of the systems and how they work, and how, like, I mean, we're talking about, we'll be very cut and paste. We're talking about war. If you're looking at Black people as a whole, and our general, our captains, our admirals are not even well equipped to go against the generals and the admirals that are within this system, is mayhem every single time. It's a slaughter of Black folks, and it is the systematic cycle that you're referring to where, okay, we talk about financial literacy. Just because you hear financial literacy, you hear 401k, you hear Dow Jones, SPX, you hear all these things, you're not aware of them. You just hear it. That's just because you hear it. If I walk past the coffee shop, and if you walk past me and I'm in the coffee shop and you look at my laptop and you see these charts, and I just give you 5 minutes of what they actually mean, that is not awareness. You have just been giving a brief synopsis of what trading is. Awareness is actually knowledge, and knowledge of the subject.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can't agree with that 100%, because we don't know how these systems truly work. Like I talk a lot about my godbrother. My godbrother, HBCU grad, went to Howard Law, living a lawyer's dream. And I had to educate him on 401ks, and like, you see these percentages and you're like, oh yeah, this is what I'm going to get. But I'm explaining to him, like, if you give me $1,000 and I promise you a 4% return, and I turn that $1,000 into 20, you're not getting 4% of that 20. You're still getting 4% of that 1,000 that you gave me. And so if we have people that are in these positions to enlighten the youth, but they don't even know how the system that they're a part of truly even works, then that's not, they're not giving them pertinent knowledge to where they're going to be those people that really break the systematic chains, CHAINS, not change. So I get where you're going, and I do agree a lot of what, you know, we talk about offline and what Ian has to say, but Ian is speaking from a perspective of someone that's been on Wall Street. Like he knows, forgot his name, but Einstein of Wall Street, Peter Tuchman. Like he's rubbing shoulders with people that have not only helped build the system, but have grown up within that system, where their parents were previously in the system, their grandparents were in the system. So they have generations of knowledge. So I don't necessarily like that, because I may not be making the change that I think I'm making now, but with me being, you know, the second generation, you know, from my dad, that is fully like financially aware of like how taxes work, how trading works, we may not be the generational curse breakers, or the people that we're not going to be the foundational pieces that people are still, you know, getting money from our hard work, you know, 10 generations down the line, but we're at least the rose that grew in the concrete. Like we're the start of that. So again, I love the way that it could go, but I don't think Black people as a whole are truly aware. Like, think about it. Just to finish it right, not to go too long with it. The most that Black folks know about systems that you're talking about is taught in public school. Who determines what our curriculums in public schools are? The white folks, people that are creating the system. So if I'm creating a system, if I have all these cheat codes and these tax breaks and all these things, and I know that if a lot of people get their hands on this knowledge and it shows just how unjust it is, then at some point I'm no longer going to be the beneficiary of said tax codes and of said breaks, because now everyone's getting the break and no one's truly benefiting. So, or no one's truly benefiting because the government's going to go in and rewrite that code. So I think the thought is there, but I don't think the application of that when it comes to Black folks is truly, because we don't even know our history at the end of the day. Like, we have plenty of conversations about how Black culture isn't even Black culture. So I hand that back to you, my brother.
Sure. I can certainly appreciate that perspective, and I do see where there are potential shortcomings within that logic, within that line of thinking. No line of thinking is perfect. And as somebody who considers myself aware, I think that's where that initiative comes into play. So for myself being, I know certain things, and let's say in the future, I have a family and I understand that, okay, the schools, public schools are not going to teach my children these things. I have two options. I could allow them to just go through there and accept that and say, okay, well, the school isn't teaching my child. But at this point, I don't expect the public school education to properly equip my child with everything they need to be a fully functioning, successful adult that can not only operate within the system, but be super successful. And so I think that when we realize that something isn't designed for us, it's up to us to design something that works for us. That's my point.
For sure.
Yeah.
I agree. But then again, if you think about the great innovators and the great designers of today, they all want to be with the Apples, the Teslas. Like, it's you going into an established thing rather than you building up a new foundational piece on your own. There are some people that are doing that. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to be
just because you see
umbrella.
my cars behind me. That's what you brought up? man. Just because you see my cars behind me.
Not even. But I do get the I do get the point, and I think there is great intention behind it. And of course, we've already had the conversation about intention. But I think until like the mind is sparked, like we were talking about pre going on air, if you have the mind of Fred Hampton sparked with the mind of Steve Jobs, then you're gonna have true progress.
Yeah, because I think because essentially what we're kind of getting to here is that the awareness is progress in a sense that it's someone saying there's a problem, right? And because I acknowledge that there's a problem, I can make a decision on whether or not to prioritize the resolution of this problem. And if I want to prioritize the resolution of this problem, I also have to acknowledge the fact that the same brain that created the problem may not be the same brain that's equipped to fix the problem. So therefore, I need to start including other perspectives, bringing other people to the table who can help me to fill in the gaps. You know, the brain is taking in 11 million bits of information per second. It can't grab it all. That's why we need diverse perspectives at the table to come, not just from a sociological perspective, but even from an individual perspective. If I know that there's something getting in the way, if I know that, you know, back to Joshua, your point, like I'm not motivated to come to the gym, maybe I need to reach out to a trainer to help me to identify, maybe I'm just not doing the right workouts, or what is stopping me from executing. You know, I know what I want to do, I just can't seem to figure out why I'm not doing it. Reaching out to, you know, a coach or therapist or anything like that. So I think that is really, awareness is step one, but step two is bringing those diverse thoughts and expertise to the table to help you to overcome the experiences that you don't have, overcome the blind spots that you have within you, and also to open your world up to possibilities that you didn't even know existed.
Lauren, what you're detailing is a beautiful synopsis of the motto for the Infusion Network.
Right.
Think, connect, and build. Those 3 words. And so, Josh, your awareness, thinking. Lauren, as you just detailed, connecting. The building part is the work most people get stuck at and they fail because there is no building. How are we looking on time? I want to be considerate of our guests.
I do have, I am coming up on my slot. So I do have to take the family to dinner.
Oh, no worries. Well, we appreciate your time.
Got to get priorities, right?
My daughter's already brought her head in here, like, you said 4:00.
But yeah, okay, so we'll get ended then right there. But I want to thank Lauren, James, for coming on the actual podcast show. You're of course a part of the Infusion Network now, so feel free to come back. We had a great conversation, so thank you. Okay.
Yeah, anytime I'm invited back, I'll show up. I love it. It was a great conversation.
Yeah. Love it.
And we usually end with the recommendation of the week, which is given by Des. You have one?
Yeah, I'm gonna be a little facetious and go with the autobiography of Malcolm X. But no, I actually didn't come prepared with one. I was gonna let the guests give one because I just started "Can't Hurt Me" by David Goggins, but I haven't read enough to truly recommend it.
I just finished his second one.
You reading or you listen to the audio?
No, I actually have it like on the couch.
Man, get the audiobook. The man is listen. Get the audiobooks because he's got some extra little things in the audiobooks.
Yeah.
Ooh. Okay. Yeah.
I might do that. My Audible token is coming up in 4 days, so
get you know them credits that come every 30 days. I know what you mean.
You say you haven't read it enough to know what it's about?
I haven't read it enough to recommend it. Like everything that I've recommended, I've at least read. I'll say a minimum of 1/3 to know that like okay, the last 2/3 should be equal to the 1/3 that I've read this far.
Yeah, I'm glad you said should be.
Yeah, should.
So Lauren and James, do you guys have any recommendation of the week you guys can give? It could be a book, album, it could be whatever you guys feel.
Maybe the one I'll just go with the one I was talking about pre-recording is The Courage to Be Disliked. I'm very bad with author names, so please just go by the title. I'm bad at quotes and author names, and it's also by a Japanese philosopher. But definitely an excellent book to help you to confront some of those hidden competing commitments that you might have around moving forward. So that's why it's really important.
Nice.
Good stuff.
All right. Again, thank you for coming on the show. If you guys like the discussion, don't forget to hit the like button. We're going to see you guys next week. Peace.
Thanks, everyone.
Be well.